Welcome everyone to episode 98 of Raw Sport. My name is Ahmed El Houli, and today we have a very special guest, legendary boxing promoter, Boxing Hall of Famer, Mr. Lou DiBella. Lou, how are you, mate? How's things?
I'm good, Ahmed. I was actually looking at the headline across the bottom of the screen that says "Unboxing's Evolution and What's Next." I actually think part of the problem is boxing never evolved appropriately, and
Perfect.
that's why it's in the mess that it's in, and that's why it's in a period right now of definite change. And I think it's going to be foundational change, and that's simply because I don't think we have evolved. I think the problems that existed 35 years ago, 36 years ago, when I first got into boxing, are still the exact same problems. No governance, nobody overseeing the sport, no long term view, too many weight classes, too many champions, too many ratings organizations, too much corruption, too much bad judging, too much connection between the judges and the ratings organizations, not enough health and safety protection, not adequate protection against PED use. All this stuff has been, these have been plaguing boxing for decades, and finally it caught up with the fucking sport, and now the sport's paying a price for it. And that's why it's so easy for a turkey to gain immediate control and power, why it's so easy, potentially will be so easily, for a company like TKO working together with the Saudi government in Turkey to really dominate the sport, because they all have the money and the ability to invest in making wholesale changes. So I think wholesale changes are ahead for the sport. Doesn't mean people will be put out of business. Doesn't mean you're going to have a lot of the same names disappearing really quickly. But it does mean that I think the whole nature of the industry is going to change dramatically. I don't expect there to be, for example, in 5 years, four world championship organizations functioning independently and all making a lot of money. I don't think that's going to continue. I think the whole fabric of the traditional way that we have run boxing worldwide, which is frankly a bit of a free for all and chaos anyway, I think that is heading toward change.
You know what's funny, Lou? That was going to be my first question. So you pretty much just read my mind and went straight into it. And now there's a pattern here. Boxing filled with Harvard graduates, yourself previously, my understanding, Bob Arum,
Al
uh,
Heyman, Al
Al
Heyman.
Heyman, very smart people, very, very smart people.
Yeah, but
How
it's
did we get to
always been
this?
the problem is this, and this goes traditionally, and this goes for generations. It's been every man for himself. There's been no commissioner. There's been nobody in charge. We never self-governed. Promoters never put together a promoters association. Never had any agreement among ourselves to look out for the betterment of the sport. And then the worst thing was when television networks began to care less, and they took away quality control. There hasn't been a person like I functioned that functions in the matter I functioned at HBO in the 1990s. There really hasn't been anyone functioning in that capacity in the same way since. Um, the quality of boxing has, the more exclusive deals were made between promoters and television networks, the shittier the sport got.
Okay.
And the more there were different sides of the street, quote unquote, with a PBC promotion, with their networks, with Top Rank at ESPN, with for years it was Eddie at Sky and Frank elsewhere, and everyone had their exclusive deals, and the product sucked. And not only did the product suck, we never we never beat our own problems. We never cleaned up the issue of bad judging. We never got rid of bad decisions. We kept making the same mistakes. And that's opened the door for what's going on with Turkey and Saudi Arabia. And that's opened the door for a great opportunity, I think, for TKO, that's a publicly traded company capitalized to $25 billion. They're in a pretty good situation. If TKO in Turkey doesn't manage to have the most powerful promotion pretty quickly, it's because they fucked up. Like they're in a perfect position right now to make a lot of changes, and I think they probably will. That's what I expect to happen. I don't think it's going to be overnight. I don't think people are going to be put out of business if they don't want to be put out of business. I think the old system will continue to survive for a while, but I think we're entering a period of incredible change, and time will tell how good or bad the change will be.
Okay. A man who's been in a sport for what is it, over 30 years there, Lou?
Yeah, it's now at this point it's 36 years.
Absolutely. You've seen changes over time from being inside the network at HBO to running your own promotion to having some of the world's biggest fighters, right?
Correct.
What's been the single biggest problem in that journey that you think there's many, but what's the one that's caused the sport the most harm?
Exclusive network contracts, probably. But to be honest with you, the issue I just raised with you in my long diatribe, and I apologize for my stream of consciousness, the sport's inability to fix its own problems. Fucking boxing can't get out of its own way. And that's the reality. And by the way, people have been given incredible opportunities and they fucked them up. PBC fucked up an incredible opportunity when it first got in. It had $500 million. It had networks running around to make deals with it, and it didn't manage to keep it together. It thought it could become the UFC, and it couldn't. And
Mhm.
Eddie came to America, and he wasn't gonna work with everybody. He was gonna conquer. Well, he didn't conquer, right? And you can look at the people come in and out, and the thought is always to dominate. The thought's never to work together to build a television product that competes with anything. Boxing at its best is high theater. In my mind, a great boxing match stands with any great sporting event,
For
right?
sure.
But not the way we've handled it. One of the things, unfortunately, that's always resonated with me about some of the shit Dana White says, and I'm very different than Dana. I disagree with Dana on a lot of shit. Everything, including our politics, are completely different. But I do respect the guy, and I think he's a great promoter. But I also think when he says that when boxing does a big event, it looks like a fire sale. That
Hmm.
boxing looks like it's always having an going out of business sale.
Hmm.
It resonates with me because it's not untrue. Like we pull big events out of our pockets now and then, but for the most part, we offer a lot of shit product with promoters trying to operate within their own little universes, not
Hmm.
enough working together. That's why I think it's fascinating, by the way, that since the announcements of TKO with Turkey and Saudi creating this new promotion, all of a sudden now you're hearing Bob and we're going to do more stuff with PBC, and Gary Jonas, we're going to do more stuff with PBC, and Eddie, well, we're going to make bigger fights, and we're going to, we're the greatest promoters on earth. We'll be just fine. Well, guess what? You've had like decades of being the only promoters in town with exclusive TV contracts and loads of money and you had all the ability to make all the big events you wanted to, and you couldn't do it, and you didn't do it. And we're supposed to believe you're going to fix it now? I don't think so.
They Everyone's saying now that they're going to work together, basically.
All right, good
Uh,
luck.
but
Let's see. Here's the reality. When you
mhm,
have four ratings organizations and they all have interim champions, and a lot of them have mega champions and full champions and semi champions and silver champions and gold champions, every motherfucker is a fucking champion. If everyone's a champion, no one's a champion. And
100%.
unfortunately,
Yeah,
outside of Great Britain, where the sport is really, really strong,
yeah,
and a few other countries where they have a couple of world champions that are my significant other's probably going to get home from her meditation class, and
that's
that's why
fine.
the dog is barking. So I
That's fine.
apologize.
Yeah,
Um, most world champions can walk down a fucking street in a crowded street in their home, and people won't know who they are. That's
yeah.
not true in the UK, but that's certainly true in the United States. It's true to a large extent in Canada. It's true to
Australia.
it's true of a lot of countries in Europe right now. Here's the big problem we have right now. Who are pop culture heroes in boxing? Well, it's guys that no longer fight. Mike Tyson,
Mm.
or it's a Jake Paul who has inordinate power and is basically about to control women's boxing because no one else wants to control women's boxing. No one's made a big investment in it, and he's making a big investment in it. And this is the nature of boxing is changing. We no longer have champions. Our heavyweight champion is not the most recognizable athlete in the world any longer.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have champions that transcend boxing for the most part. There are no longer like the equivalent of our late night comedy shows and talk shows. You don't have boxers cruising in and out of them. And even in Great Britain, where boxing is much bigger than it is almost any place else right now, it's not as big as it was a few decades ago. That's a problem. And certainly in America, where people no longer talk about the sport like a pop culture event. Like, it's our champions are no longer pop culture heroes. We need to do a better job of promoting it. And there probably is a great opportunity for people trying to change the whole system of boxing. I think there's a real good chance. Look, you just saw in Australia a match between Zoo and Joey Spencer,
Yeah.
right? Did it strike you that Joey Spencer was a world class, like, great fighter? No.
Not at
Joey
all.
Spencer got all sorts of TV exposures on BBC. They gave him all sorts of fights. He got big wins. He developed a name. If you are creating television product with competitive fights and someone begins to win, you will build your own stars.
Yeah.
And that's the thought problem, I believe, behind this concept of a league that the TKO and Turkey Al Sheikh have talked about, which is not really a league. It's a new promotion. It's a new version of it's attempting to create your own promotion that's within yourself. You don't need to go to outside ratings organizations to rate your fighters. You don't need to have 4 different organizations you're negotiating with. You create good fights. You let fighters fight each other. You let the best rise to the top. The fighters that are televised by this new promotion are going to become stars. And who would you trust right now? The old guard that's failed to build up boxing, that we've all been part of watching boxing get smaller, or people that have done it in wrestling, done it in MMA, that are capitalized with the Saudi fund on one side and a $26 billion publicly traded company in America on the other. Who would you think has a better chance of making wholesale changes to the sport? I guess I honestly I'd put my money on Turkey and Dana before I would put it on Frank or Eddie or Bob or Oscar or Al.
Wow. All right. So, what do you say to people, Lou? And I'm going to push back here a bit on you. What do you say to people, Lou? You were a part of that makeup. Why didn't you push the
Yeah,
change?
I tried to have a promoters. I called for and was one of the promoters involved in getting everyone together a decade ago to see if we could start to self-govern our sport. And we had a promoter summit. And the truth was, the guys then that had the biggest TV deals, and this is in the age when exclusive contracts were just starting, they were happy. They didn't really want to work with other people. So the whole concept of promoters working together, it never really took off. But here's the truth of the matter. It hasn't fucking taken off since.
It won't.
It's one of the reasons why now there are various people seeing the opportunity to come in and say, I want to fix this, but it's not with working with the old guard. I want to fix this. I need to create something completely new. I can fully understand that, looking at what these people have observed.
Yeah.
Haven't observed people working together for the betterment of a sport and creating a cohesive television product that you can sell together for the most money in an open market. People
Yeah.
haven't worked together for the most part.
And that's probably why we're seeing the downfall of the major promoters, especially in the US, where the market's been hurt the most, in my opinion. We see Top Rank is really, according to all reports, struggling to get a TV deal. PBC the same.
Well, there's a whole other issue. It's not just the TV deals aren't particularly attractive to people.
Okay.
What's attractive to people are the big event. The Tyson Jake Paul has more power. Canelo is attractive to people. It will not be surprising when Canelo versus Crawford is on Netflix. Why?
Yeah.
Because that's the biggest superstar in boxing, Canelo, in the biggest matchup you could probably make for him at the moment,
Hmm.
right? So that will go to Netflix. But you don't see a lot of television networks clamoring for just a pedestrian world champion. You
Mm.
know, right now, look. The television marketplace has been completely screwed up in Australia.
Hmm.
No
Yeah.
Limits had a
Stranglehold. Yeah.
stranglehold on it, and frankly, it's not like No Limits built any stars. In fact, you could argue that the Zoo brothers are not as big as they were before that contract started. So, and they really not only did they discourage competition, the television networks in Australia, they pretty much strangled
They squashed
competition.
it. Yeah. They
And
absolutely squashed it.
so America's not the only place boxing television's a shit show.
Yeah.
It's a shit show all over the world. I mean, you could argue it's even where it's the most successful. You could argue it's a shit show in Great Britain because I can't explain to you why Sky TV has the deal they have with Boxer.
Yeah, that's a really interesting deal. It doesn't make much sense. Yeah.
It makes perfect sense because it's in boxing, where nothing makes sense.
Well, all right. Let's stay on this TKO deal. The Saudis coming into the sport.
Look,
All right.
time will tell. Time will tell what the Saudi relationship with TKO will. We could all sit here and give opinions or whatever. I indicated my opinion. I think they have a better opportunity to remake the sport than any other player that's come in the last 20 years has. They have the better
Women's
opportunity.
bo-
And I've also
women's
said if they
yeah,
fuck up, it's going to be on them. If they fuck up, it's going to be on them that they didn't
yeah.
do it right. Because they certainly have every asset they need to try to do it. So, it's going to be interesting. Turkey himself has talked about a period of transition. He's still going to want to do the biggest fights, and the biggest fights still mean that you're going to have to do some business with everybody. But developing that next generation of stars, someone's going to say, I'm breaking from the traditional system. I don't give a shit about meaningless little belts. I'm not going to go to conventions for ratings organizations. I'm not going to sustain four competing belts in four different organizations. I'm not going to deal with interim championships. The person or the entity, and I think it's probably going to be TKO, that says, I want to tear down the old way, has the best chance of succeeding, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of women's boxing, you were an early believer in women's boxing.
I'm still a believer, but no one else was a believer. I tried to bring a plan to the zone to basically be the home of women's boxing and create a promotion, create a league, but they were too busy dancing with Eddie alone and back when to want to really do that. Then Eddie, because it was convenient during the pandemic, stocked up on women's fighters, and now, frankly, the Saudi. I don't think the Saudis are particularly big fans of women's boxing. That's pretty obvious. And the only party right now that is raising money and trying to control women's boxing um, is Jake Paul and MVP. And frankly, they're going to dominate women's boxing very quickly because they're the only ones that are paying for it. And I have no place to go. I've already, to some extent, I'm forced into doing deals with TKO because they're the only party buying right now. And I think you're going to see in the next few weeks Queensberry and Matchroom fighters being, and in fact, you're going to probably see in the next 24 hours Queensberry and Matchroom and previously DiBella fighters announcing fights with Jake Paul and his company. Well, right now, to be honest with you, no one's trying to dominate that market, and everybody's running away from it. I mean, I don't have any relationship with Turkey, so I'm not running away from shit. However, I've really invested a lot of my time and energy in bringing my women to the next level, and I can get them to titles, but I can't make these fucking networks who deal so unfairly buy the fights. So if it takes me releasing a woman, I don't want to release people, but if it takes me doing a deal with Jake Paul to get a woman that I respect and value and opportunity, I'm going to do a deal with Jake Paul if I have no choice.
Is it?
So
Do you believe they can pull it off in terms
I don't
of?
know if they can pull it off, but at the moment they're certainly willing to try, and
Yeah.
they're offering more money for these women than anybody else is. So time will tell. I'm not against somebody trying to be a champion for women, even if it's fucking Nikisa Badarian, who I have no relationship with whatsoever, or Jake, and neither one of whom I particularly love. But you know what? If they're doing the right thing for women, and a woman that I'm working with benefits from a deal with them, I'm going to try to see if I can do a deal with them.
Okay. The most common criticism about the Saudis has been the Saudis hosting events in Saudi Arabia, and people there's no atmosphere, people not rocking up, and so on. Is that adding to the worsening of the sport, or is that just, as you said, a transition that we
It
have to go
doesn't
through?
it doesn't ever help to take the sport away from the masses. And to some extent that's why I don't really understand this Times Square thing,
Hmm.
because there's only going to be 300 people in the audience,
Yeah.
and it's happening. By the way, it's also going to be in outdoor fights during daylight time, like when it's still daylight. And I've never loved the look of, personally, it's only personal taste, I've never liked the look of an outdoor show in the light. Like I like the dark and the lights and whatever,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Of course.
that's me. But I think it's spectacular to close down Times Square. I mean, it's a real flex. But how many people? Only 300 people are going to be able to see it. I don't even understand that. And but Riyadh sees it as an encouragement for people to consider visiting Saudi Arabia, an encouragement for people to recognize that Riyadh is a home of big events. I don't think that's negative, but I do think you are, to some extent, pulling big fights away from the masses. Now, that being said, I want to be honest with you. I don't know where Bivol and Beterbiev would have been a huge event in a crowd. I think if you put it in Madison Square Garden, I don't believe it would have sold tickets. I'm being honest. So the fact that they're taking an event that is one of the best fights you can make in all of the sport, giving it a home in Riyadh, and saying to people, "Well, come and see a great fight card in Riyadh." I mean, what's negative about that? I don't find anything negative about that. I do think if you're doing Joshua versus Fury, you don't do it in Riyadh. You do it in a football stadium in the
Wembley.
UK,
Yeah.
and you could put Riyadh season on the center of the mat, and the whole Saudi royal family can sit in the first row.
Yeah.
But you want to do that in the UK. If you do Canelo versus Skull, I think it's fine and good to do it in Riyadh. If you're doing Canelo versus Crawford, you need to be at the stadium in Dallas or the stadium in Vegas, right? So I don't really think that uh, if every big fight was taking place in Riyadh, it'd be one thing. But I don't think, I think they know better than that. I think that there are some smart people involved in what they're doing.
How much has that period or time of the zero impacted our sport? I call that the Mayweather reign.
And this, it's not a period of time, man. The zeros have been a thing for as long as I've ever been in the sport, and I've bitched about it forever. But it continues to be a thing. And the ratings organizations, how many times do you see piece of shit guys, like, really, like, I don't want to be anybody that steps into a ring I have respect for, but I don't have respect for a guy that can't fight rising to top two or three in the world ratings. But if you get enough fights against stiffs, and you build somebody in enough fights where the other guy falls down, and you pay for enough stupid little belts for fights that mean nothing, and you go to enough conventions, you can get people ranked that don't belong ranked. And the
Yeah.
system is rigged. It's rigged behind spending money on the ratings organizations. It's always been rigged. It's not new stuff. But I got to tell you something. I think the fact that I believe Turkey doesn't like the ratings organizations. I believe Dana White doesn't like the ratings organizations. I don't think Nick Khan likes the ratings organizations. I I'm not making any. I have friends and people I love in some of these ratings organizations. There are other ratings organizations I think are criminal, or at least one I do. I don't have close relationships everywhere. There are very good people across the board at every one of these ratings organizations who love boxing. That's the truth. Um, but man, you can't have four different governing bodies competing. You can't have the ratings of one organization looking very different than the ratings of another. You can't have four champions and four interim champions at every weight class. You're destroying what's left of the fabric of the sport. You're not allowing the cream to rise to the top and be recognized. You know, and I think that the understanding that the system has to change and has to be consolidated, if not totally broken down, I think that's going to create a greater opportunity for success than trying to fix it in the same broken form it's in. It's broken. And anyone who's trying to tell you it hasn't been broken for a long time is full of shit. And anyone who disagrees with me is really fucking stupid or they're lying.
I mean,
Right?
results speak for themselves. I mean, the sport is struggling, and the organisations are struggling across the board. Um, if we keep going, one of the key points now in the world that we're seeing, and I mean, these organisations are a barrier to have been a huge barrier across the board to the growth of the sport. I mean, Dana White said it himself. He goes, "I'm not working with the organisation. I'm going to break the sport down and rebuild it." Do you believe in 5 years' time these four main organisations will still exist? And if so, how impactful will they be?
They will all be less impactful, every one of them. I don't think they will cease to exist. I think they will have to change form. I think they will have to trim down. I think some of their role will change. Look, you may see one rating organizations primarily working with the former Soviet bloc and the Soviet Union. You could see another ratings organization that winds up having very close relationships with particular promoters or particular countries. They will find a niche and ability to exist.
Mm-hmm.
But if the most powerful promotion becomes TKO and they are able to showcase competitive fights constantly, similar to the UFC, and give their own belts, if they are the biggest and best promotion, their belt will eventually have the most significance and the most cachet.
Yeah,
I don't think that it'd be so easy to close down the WBC or the WBA or the WBO or the IBF. But I think that they will have to change and they will not be as significant. And I think eventually their power in the sport will dwindle. I think the bigger, if one promotion can truly create competitive, high quality product across the board, do away with the useless zeros, do away with the 20-year-old guy fighting one real fight, 20-0 guy fighting one real fight in a year and fighting three fights against complete overmatched nobodies so he could build his record. Like that stuff's not going to exist in a Dana White run promotion. You already know that. It doesn't
yeah,
exist in UFC.
yeah,
Like this is one of the reasons why I think they have some inherent advantages, right? They know how to do it. They've done it before. It doesn't happen in 1 or 2 years, though. So, could all four organizations exist in 5 years? Maybe. Could three out of the four, or two out of the four exist? Maybe. Might two or three of them merge and become an alternative to the TKO operation in a sense? Maybe. A lot of things may happen. Anything could happen.
yeah.
But one thing I promise you is I think things are going to look dramatically different in 5 years and even more different in 10 years.
Louis, you're a man who's invested in the grassroots of the pros.
Yeah, but not anymore. I'm done. I mean, uh, and not for any reason. Not that I don't love it, but it's like fighting a losing battle at the moment. Not until things clean up and resolve themselves. It's just too difficult. I managed to make money and build stars even without a platform for all these years, but it's been with great stress. And frankly, my baseball businesses are way bigger businesses than boxing right now. And I'm building $130 million ballpark in Richmond, Virginia.
It's
We
pretty
had our
cool.
opening. We had our opening series in our old ballpark, our 40-year-old ballpark last weekend, and in a 3-game series, we had 25,000 people in the ballpark and led all of minor league baseball in the United States in attendance over the weekend. So, I mean, I'm running some major businesses right now. I'm at the point of my life I don't really want to be aggravated for no good reason. And I'm not retired from boxing, but I definitely have de-emphasized it. And at the moment, I'm enjoying running. I'm enjoying building a ballpark. I'm enjoying running 2 baseball teams, and I'm enjoying not letting boxing get me fucking sick.
What my question was going to be is that you've been there at that uh, at that grassroots level. You put on tons of fights, and you found a way to prosper and survive at that level. We're seeing the same happen now with pro box and what they're trying to do.
Well, I think they have an interesting plan. I mean, I don't fully understand how they monetize it. I tell that to Gary Jonas all the time when we do speak. They make some good fights. Um, it's going to be interesting to see what that evolves into. He seems to be doing more stuff with PBC. Um, he is creating a bit of a brand, and he's doing pretty high quality shows. They're like reminiscent of the old show boxes, and frankly, he's doing the kind of thing that I was doing in Broadway boxing in New York, but I stopped having television partner. I don't have anybody contributing to it. And grassroots boxing is not being supported right now. It's one of the reasons I think TKO has another chance to really make something work. There is no middle class in boxing. There's
Correct.
no there's no lower middle class or middle class in boxing. So if they come in, people were scoffing, oh, those numbers are so low. Oscar was making fun of it. Oscar ain't that smart, bro. Because most fighters who are starting out 6-0, 7-0, 8-0 aren't making 20 grand. And most
Yeah.
fighters don't get to sign with a league, with a promotion where they're looking to make nothing but competitive fights. They're not going to release you if you lose 1 or 2 fights if you fight well. They're going to keep you for a year and give you enough fights that you can pay your bills. They're creating a middle class for fighter. So and for example, like I can't bitch about what Jake Paul's doing because I couldn't sell an undisputed bantamweight tournament to any network where all I wanted to pay the girls was 50 grand a piece, and no network
Wow.
would support that. But you know what? Jake Paul's going to pay these girls at least that, and he's creating his own promotion. He raised money. He's got Netflix to buy a Katie Taylor,
Amanda
Serrano
Serrano.
all girl show. Um, I don't have to like Nikisa and Jake. I don't, but I can respect what the fuck they're trying to do.
Yeah.
They're seeing an opportunity. They're committed to women in boxing right now. At the moment, pretty much nobody else is, and I'm tired. I really, at this point, I'm content to spend the majority of my time where I can be most fruitful. And at the moment, that's not in struggling in this changing time of boxing. At some point down the line, might I reemerge in a more meaningful way or align with somebody or consult with somebody or be a quality control person and make fights, which is for TV, which was I've always thought I was the best at. I would consider that. But at the moment, I don't want to say I don't need boxing, but I don't. So at the moment, I'm just trying to keep myself sane and have some fun. And building a ballpark is pretty cool. And, leading a league in attendance is pretty cool. And next year, opening that new ballpark that's going to, by the way, have an internal venue with 800 seats that has a TV studio. And I could do boxing and
There we
wrestling and
go.
other little sports out of
There
that
we go.
little arena. Um, you may see me doing some interesting things in the future, but at the moment, honestly, my concentration's more on baseball.
Absolutely. One last one from me. Boxing, uh, are they underestimating the power? Like So this is the way I see TKO, right? And you're the more experienced and the wiser head. They're going to come in, take your average fighter, put them in these evenly matched fight, exciting fights. They put them through this marketing machine of theirs that they're going to build profiles slowly, slowly, slowly. Tell their stories, have the average person relate to this person, which is what they've
It's
done.
story. They are better suited. Here's what happened when HBO left boxing. When
Perfect.
HBO left boxing, it left a huge void in two ways.
Mm-hmm.
HBO did the biggest of big events live on HBO.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact it was on HBO and it was live and it was like a big, big event, it got worldwide attention. It put like a tuxedo on the sport. It put a red carpet there. There were more stars in the, at events and regular events, regularly. You go to a boxing event, you saw the stars come out. But part of the reason people came out is people cared about the athletes. You got up and close and personal with them. You knew what the stories were. There were particular guys you loved. There were particular guys you hated. Look at the guys who have managed to succeed, by the way, in the last few years. Some of them are bad boys. Conor Ben's bigger after he tested for fucking positive for steroids. Gervonta Davis has been a very, in a lot of ways, polarizing guy, but
Controversial, yeah.
he's a big star.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the guy. Ryan Garcia looked like he was having a public nervous breakdown. And Jake Paul's the social media influencer. Look at the people that have star power. Right? It's people that have been able to get your attention, and people either love them or hate them, but they want to see them. Mayweather had that effect.
Yeah.
Mayweather was more hated than almost any great fighter ever. He also had a lot of people that loved him to death. And the
Mm-hmm.
people that loved him wanted to pay for him. And the people that hated him wanted to pay for him. That's how you become a star. Same kind of thing Prince Nassim Mehmed had going for him. People had their very strong opinions, one way or the other, but everyone wanted to see them. We don't have those guys now that transcend boxing, as many of them. I think that in storytelling, in getting TV deals all over the place, in creating stars from scratch by allowing people to fight one another and emerge the way they did in those old Contender series.
Mm.
I think there's a lot of ways that Dana and Nick Khan and the WWE, UFC, Brain Trust, along with Turkey, I think they have a great opportunity to do some really interesting things. I'm not saying they're going to defeat everybody. I'm not rooting for them to destroy or change. Look, destroy the old way of doing things. I think anything that tears down the old system is probably good for boxing.
Yeah.
On
Absolutely.
that note, I want to go watch the end of my Nick game.
No problem. All right. Thank you very much, Lou. Appreciate you for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. We will wrap it up. Any parting words for us, Lou?
No, I think the next few years are going to be interesting and transformative for boxing. I think there's going to be some rocky moments ahead. I think there are going to be some interesting developments ahead. I think no one knows exactly how things are going to break, but I think it's going to be interesting to watch.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Lou DiBella, thank you very much for joining me on Raw Sport. Take care, everyone. We'll catch you on the next episode of Raw